Welcome to another edition of It's the Art Stupid, the public radio-themed podcast where we discuss the latest contributions from the arts, theater, cinema, and music. I'm your host, Alex Dugan. Today's episode dives into the provocative new album, Problematic, from the band Motihari Brigade. And we've got some truly unusual and legendary guests to comment on that topic. Joining us today, we have George Orwell, author of the literary classics 1984 and Animal Farm, known for his warnings about dystopian surveillance and thought control. Also with us, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, famous for corrupting the youth of Athens, and father of critical reasoning and inventor of the Socratic method. I think you maybe due some back royalties on that one.
I never claimed exclusive ownership of it.
Well, these days, people would try to monetize a thing like that. And finally, we are quite excited about this one, the one and only Jesus Christ, teacher of spiritual truth and moral responsibility, and founding influencer of the Christian religious tradition. Welcome, gentlemen, to It's the Art Stupid. Thank you for being here. George Orwell, let's start with you. And may I call you George?
Certainly. Mr. Orwell seems a bit formal.
All right then, George. Thank you for that. Now, I'm sure we could talk to any one of you for hours about your own incredible lives and legacies. Each of you are known to be important thinkers. But today, we're here to find out what you think about Motihari Brigade's new album, Problematic. So, George, have you had a chance to listen to the album?
Yes, I have. I was given an advanced copy, you see. For some reason, this band seems to have latched onto me as some sort of patron saint or guru. Indeed, they've become so obsessed that they've been campaigning that my birthday ought to be celebrated as a sort of holiday for independent critical thinking. They even named the band after my birthplace in India, the town of Motihari, which in my day was a summer hill station for the British Empire. Darndest thing, really. Who would have expected?
That must have come as a surprise. And how does one celebrate George Orwell's birthday?
Well, preferably over a glass of single malt scotch. I don't mind people doing that, as I did in my day. That seems an appropriate remembrance. And this year, on June 25th, Motihari Brigade are releasing the new album, Problematic, as a sort of birthday present in my honour. As I say, I've had the advance copy, so at least that part shouldn't come as a surprise to me. I've already had a listen, and so I know just what to expect.
All right then, George. Before we get into your reaction, I have to ask, patron saint of independent critical thinking? Jesus Christ, do you have any reaction to that?
لكن يجب أن أقول إنه عندما
I don't know
حدث
about
شيء
declaring
مشابه
Orwell a patron saint in any sort of official capacity. I leave that sort of thing up to the bureaucracy in Rome. Oh, excuse me, the Vatican. The fact that the Catholic Church is in Rome still amuses me, but I don't know about the glass of whiskey. I'm more partial to a cup of wine for an occasion that kind.
Socrates, I see you want to jump into the conversation. What do you have to say?
Well, I agree with Jesus Christ about the wine. In vino veritas, as they say in Latin. In wine there is truth. In Greek, stokrasi iparche I aletheia. Perhaps not literal truth, but I find that wine lends itself to my method of philosophical dialogue.
All right, gentlemen, it seems you're all ready for this topic. So let's get back to George Orwell's reaction.
All right then, we've all agreed to engage in a Socratic discussion over a glass of wine on my birthday, June 25th.
So, you've listened to the new album, George. What's your reaction?
Well, to tell you the truth, I had seen a lot of this coming, but it hadn't occurred to me that it could be expressed in quite this way through the medium of rock music, which in any case didn't exist in my day, and since then I'd generally viewed as a popular distraction devoid of any actual content, at least of course until Dark Side of the Moon came along. My own form of expression was the novel, a story told through characters, and that worked pretty well to paint the picture of a dystopian future society that I imagined at that time. But now the world has actually arrived at such a society. And oddly enough, now that it's arrived, I think that my novel has been widely misinterpreted or misappropriated in ways that I didn't quite anticipate. It seems that everything is Orwellian these days, no matter where you look or how one's beliefs are rooted. Orwellian on the left, Orwellian on the right. Honestly, I'm getting a bit sick of my name having been turned into an adjective in that way, so I half expected this album to be more of the same, But then when I sat down and listened to it, I was immediately struck that it was different than I'd expected, and I struggled to put my finger on it at first. But it did have a refreshing element to it, in the sense that it didn't just appropriate Orwellian dystopian blather to advance one side or another in a political struggle to then simply attack the other side. And I found that refreshing indeed, because that's actually much closer to the original set of ideas I tried to capture in my works. You see, it's not just one side or the other that has become, quote, Orwellian. It's the whole bloody lot of them. It's an illusion of an actual political debate. And I feel that my work, and the word Orwellian, of course, have been misinterpreted in that manner for quite some time now. I gather you, gentlemen, Socrates, Jesus, you must have also had some experience with your ideas being appropriated to advance an agenda in some fashion. Surely you must have some feelings about that.
Socrates?
Are you kidding me? They make me drink the hemlock because I asked too many questions, and I was a gadfly to the powerful rulers of Athens. Yes, I think I was misunderstood, or at least misrepresented. I think the leaders of Athens knew exactly what they were doing though. Thankfully, my student Plato wrote a relatively more accurate account of things, to set the record straight for the sake of history.
Well, we are getting into ancient history here. Jesus, what do you have to say to that?
Yes, first they killed me, and then I became a religion. I know what it's like to be misunderstood.
Well, let's see if we can unpack that a little bit more. But first, Jesus, I must ask. I hear that you are speaking through an interpreter. Yet I don't see an interpreter here. How are you doing that?
Well, it's just that I'm more comfortable speaking in Ancient Aramaic. That was my native language where I grew up. That's the language that I spoke then for my teachings and parables, and I'm just the most comfortable with it. I know in the modern films about me, people are used to me having a British accent, but that was more a bit of cinematic license, kind of the Hollywood spirit of the times when those films came out, I suppose. And I'm sure there were more than a few British people that simply assumed that I spoke like that because it seemed natural to them. Very British of them. I mean, it never occurred to them to pray in Aramaic, but for the convenience of your listening audience, I've arranged for a kind of instant translation service with a voice that sounds a bit like Morgan Freeman, which is how most people imagine the voice of God these days. You can call it a miracle, or chalk it up to Google Translate or AI. Honestly, it's getting hard for even me to tell the difference these days.
Okay. And also, I'm used to you having a beard.
Oh, really now? This isn't supposed to be about me. I thought it was supposed to be about Motihari Brigade.
Of course, you're right. But I had to ask.
Look, I raised Lazarus from the dead. You think I don't know how to shave? I know. People always want to see the beard, but I can't go anywhere with a beard and long hair looking like Jesus without some people inevitably recognizing me and then assuming it's a miracle and that I'm there to impart some kind of message. Okay? I get it. I am Jesus. That comes with public expectations, but sometimes I just want to go out. And I don't want to be recognized. You want the beard? I thought this was a podcast anyway. No one's going to see it.
Well, we were going to take a publicity photo.
You want the beard?
No, that's okay. Forgive me.
Of course. You're forgiven.
All right then. With that fresh start, Jesus Christ, what did you think of problematic?
Well, there are a number of themes I noticed, and I could talk about any of them, but some of them are really more up the alley of Orwell or Socrates. So I'll talk about the thing that grabbed me personally when I first listened to the album, and that was the third track, a song called Save Ourselves. The lyrics of the chorus are, looking for a new Messiah, obsessed with ourselves. No one's going to save us now. We're going to have to save ourselves. Now, when I first heard that, I was a little shocked. Maybe even offended. Not blasphemy offended, but more like, what do you mean a new Messiah? You didn't really listen to the first one now, did you? In fact, you executed him. So why do you think you'll do better with a new Messiah? But then I realized that was exactly the point, because it's actually how I often feel myself sometimes. I mean, that's exactly how I felt at the time. I was the new Messiah. It was supposed to be a New Testament about love. And I'd like to encourage people to get back to my original teachings and ideas. I'm actually in favor of some type of renewal, and I know that people often criticize the institutions of organized religion. And frankly, I've often been very critical of many of the things that have been done in my name, in the name of Christianity as an organized religion. And as a religious tradition, I feel that Christianity has strayed pretty far from my original message. I mean, that's just my opinion. but I am Jesus Christ. That's another reason I want to speak in Aramaic, to make sure that I'm not misquoted or misunderstood. In any case, I understand that many people have turned away from traditional religions and towards a kind of secular humanist morality, but then what people have turned to, these new woke secular beliefs that have replaced traditional religion, they wind up just reproducing the same kinds of problems and frankly divisions, hatred and hypocrisies that cause people to turn away from traditional religion in the first place. They didn't really solve any of the underlying problems of humanity. People are obsessed with themselves, especially when they make their spiritual beliefs all about themselves, putting themselves at the center of the universe. They're not really making things better for humanity. Maybe they think they are, but they're not bringing love into the world, or even happiness into their lives. In fact, I find that most of the decisions that make people miserable, they chose because they thought it would make them happy, but it turns out that they are actually chasing an illusion of happiness, and then they're left with a kind of spiritual void. So anyway, once I process my way through that song and all those feelings, well, then I could really just sit back and enjoy the rest of the album. The anti-war stuff never gets old, unfortunately. And the dystopian references, that's all on point these days. Again, unfortunately. I know that Orwell saw it coming, but even I can appreciate that kind of thing. And now that this technological dystopian future has fully arrived, well, at least we can listen to Motihari Brigade as a kind of soundtrack for it. So let me just end by saying I can appreciate this as a concept album. I mean, it's not Dark Side of the Moon, but it's definitely a concept album.
Well, thanks for that reaction, Jesus. Pretty significant thoughts there. So now let's turn to Socrates. What was your reaction?
Oh, there were so many familiar ideas on the album. Frankly, I was a bit flattered. It does remind me of the old days when I was corrupting the youth of Athens. This album would have set things on fire back then. Imagine the young men of Athens with this music encouraging them to ask questions and be problematic. The reaction of the city fathers. That would have really pissed them off. And from what I understand, that's what real rock and roll was supposed to do. Then there is the one song that says, "Things are not what they seem to be anymore." Now that is exactly the kind of thing that I would have said. In fact, I'm sure I said many things like that. So I kind of feel like that is my song. And it's got a menacing groove. It's perfect for Socrates rock. I am going to call it that. But just a word of warning. I mean, Motihari Brigade. You know what happened to me. And then to Jesus too. The big boys don't like it when you speak the truth to power. Just saying. So, you know. Okay then. My reaction. Well, overall, I noticed that they got my method. You know, the Socratic method. Keep asking questions. Be problematic. Basically, it's just asking questions to seek truth. This album asks a lot of questions. The rock opera war, Hubris March, it's basically a bunch of questions. One after the other. That's what I always did. So I recognized that method. You know, I mainly listen to classical music. So much of modern popular music really isn't about anything, at least until Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. But I feel that asking questions is the heart and soul of philosophy. So this is a kind of philosophy rock. And there is a place for Socrates rock.
They call it rock and roll thought crime.
All right. Well, they obviously like you, Orwell. I mean, they're celebrating your birthday. But it could be either. I don't think they are so different.
All right, well then, Socrates, you must have noticed that there is another song on the album that references you directly. The title track, Problematic, has the words, "A Socratic exploration, just attempting conversation."
Yes, well, what can I say? That was very flattering. But again, be careful. They always kill the Socrates. These days with social media, it's even worse. They cancel you with the press of a button. Deplatform, demonetize, shadow ban. I was problematic back in Athens, but there wasn't any social media, and look what happened.
Jesus, any thoughts about that?
Yes, well, I know all about that. I've read Plato's The Apology. We didn't read it in school in those days, or at least I didn't. But I did know about it because I'm omniscient. And of course, I could very much relate to the famous story of the trial of Socrates and his execution by the Athenian state. But I must say, when a very similar thing happened to me, I didn't try to apologize. I just forgave them, for they knew not what they did. And, Socrates, you have to admit that your last speech, your apology, was a little bit sorry, not sorry. I mean, really, what did you expect would happen? And now you're advising Motihari Brigade to be careful? Don't you think it's a little bit late for that advice now? I mean, after all, you and I, we weren't very careful, were we?
Yes, well, dare I say, you nailed it, Jesus.
Okay, now I am offended.
Okay, sorry, not sorry.
All right, gentlemen, moving on. George Orwell, let's get more reaction from you. You focused a lot of attention on the control of language, what with the language of Newspeak in 1984. Did you have any thoughts on the use of language in the lyrics on this album?
Well, yes. There is a lot of language that evokes the imagery of thought control. That seemed very familiar to me, and something that I've thought a great deal about from my early years as a volunteer in the Spanish Civil War, when I wrote Homage to Catalonia, and then throughout my life, right up to when I was writing 1984 on the Isle of Jura in Scotland, drinking the local scotch and working it all out. I tried to predict the future. But these days, it's gone so far beyond the printed word and newspapers. Now it's all digital algorithmic groupthink that shapes human awareness. Electronic words appear and disappear on digital platforms owned by billionaire oligarchs who are integrated with a militarized state. 1984 saw that coming. The memory hole. The endless war. It's generally explained in the book within the book, the traitor Emmanuel Goldstein's secret book that my hero Winston Smith was always trying to get his hands on, the theory and practice of oligarchical collectivism. But it's not fiction anymore these days, is it? These days people have the illusion of endless choices in an artificial digital world. But the options are actually curated and controlled to create a kind of false reality, more than ever in human history. They are removed from reality. When I listen to Motihari Brigade, I hear an alarm bell ringing out about that loud and clear.
All right, we haven't talked about the song Chatbot Don't Like It. This seems like a good place to bring that up.
Yes. Well, that's exactly what I was saying. The choices are curated and controlled, just like those bloody chatbots that are everywhere. I mean, they don't really listen to what you want, or give you any meaningful choice in the matter, and they seem to be everywhere.
Jesus? Socrates?
And people think that their prayers go unanswered. Imagine if we had a prayer chatbot. I don't think that would go over well. Oh, I shouldn't even say it. Somebody will probably invent one now, or they probably already did.
Imagine me trying to get the truth out of a chatbot. I mean, the Socratic method only works when you can pin them down, when they have to answer the question. These chatbots don't know anything about truth, and they don't even let you get to any real human beings in customer service anymore.
These chatbots, they are getting better all the time, but they will never have a soul.
All right, some strong feelings there. And it seems you're all in agreement on that topic. So let's turn back to Orwell for this. In the lyrics of the title song, Problematic, there's a line about being on the list of Big Brother for one thing after another. George, you focused a lot on Big Brother and coercive forms of social control. But now let me change gears and ask you about the song Pleasurecraft. That one's a bit different than the dystopian world that you imagined, isn't it?
Yes. You know I focused on mass propaganda, fear, and coercive measures of control. That's mainly what I saw coming in my day. But now I've come to appreciate that I terribly underestimated the use of pleasure as a mechanism for social control. I think Aldous Huxley did a somewhat better job of anticipating that possibility in his book Brave New World.
Another dystopian novel.
Indeed, and a bloody good one. I mean, I might have incorporated some of those ideas into 1984, but you can only do so much when you're telling a story and have to move the plot along. You can't deal with everything. I mean, after all, it's supposed to be a literary work, not a bloody philosophical treatise. They even made it into a movie, although I've never seen it, and don't think I could bear to watch it. In any case, I think it's a correct observation that comfort and pleasure can also be used to create a kind of coercive prison. It's not just fear that can be used to control people. What I now appreciate, and what I believe I hear in the lyrics of this Motihari Brigade, is the idea that those in power can also control people by manipulating their desires, and indeed even their own understanding of themselves as morally good people. People desire to see themselves in a positive light. They want to believe that they are good people, which is often measured by the degree to which they conform to the typical prevailing views of right-thinking, decent, liberal-minded, educated people. It's a kind of liberal conformism. But getting back to the idea of pleasure, I think it's true, probably now more than ever before, that social control can be achieved through the manipulation of pleasure. Sexual pleasure, the release of dopamine in the brain as a chemical reaction, or even a drug like soma as Huxley imagined. The possibilities are nearly endless.
All right, well, let's throw that thought over to Jesus. I'm sure he has something to say to that as a moral philosopher.
Well, my whole thing was really based on free will. In order to be true moral agents, people must have the ability to freely choose between doing good or evil. In a 1984 dystopian world like that imagined by Orwell, or frankly, in what the world has become today, where people are manipulated by algorithmic control of information and mass propaganda, it doesn't leave much room for moral choice. I mean, if you can be easily convinced by the mainstream media to kill other people that you don't even know and do it in the name religion, then what's the point of having a moral philosophy or a system of ethics? That has nothing to do with my views of morality or humanity. In order for my Christian teachings to be truly relevant, there has to be free will so that people can have the opportunity to exercise a moral choice.
Okay, well, that's all very interesting, Jesus. And I'm sure George Orwell and Socrates would have a lot to say about it. But, for the purposes of this discussion, could you somehow bring those thoughts back to Motihari Brigade's Problematic?
Okay, sure. Motihari Brigade's new album is an expression of hope that human beings can still have free will and can act as moral agents.
Wait, that sounds weirdly like a publicity blurb from a music review. But I can't tell if it's good or bad. Does that mean you like the album?
Yes, I like the album. Motihari Brigade offers a kind of hopeful rebellion against the restrictions on free will and therefore opens the possibility for moral agency. It asks people to think for themselves as individuals, as free moral agents, informed by their own capacity for reason and critical thinking. I'm sure Orwell and Socrates are in favor of that, but here's my thing. It also has to be guided by love. That's my thing. Love. That's why I like the Beatles. They were all about love, and they had a kind of spiritual element. And they did a song about me, you know. Christ, you know it ain't easy. You know that one?
Yes, I do. Socrates, I see you have something to add?
Yes, I completely agree with Jesus. I mean, who didn't like the Beatles?
George Orwell, any thoughts on that?
No, I don't have anything to add to that. I think there's been enough said about the Beatles. That was then. This is now. And I thought we were here to talk about Motihari Brigade.
So we are. Let's get back to that. I noticed the lyric in the song, The Great Refusal, that references Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Ringo. Did you catch that, Jesus?
Oh, yeah. I got a real kick out of that. I didn't see that one coming. Even though I'm omniscient, sometimes I just tune it down so I can enjoy a piece of music or a movie without already knowing the ending. And that lyric was funny.
Great, thanks. I was wondering about your reaction to that. Socrates, we were talking a moment ago about the song Pleasurecraft and how pleasure can be used as a mechanism for social control. Did that elicit any thoughts from you?
Yes, I think Orwell and Jesus had good points on that. People willingly surrender their free will out of fear to obtain safety or to obtain pleasure. But there is a danger there, the danger of an unexamined life. You know what they say, it's better to be Socrates unsatisfied than a pig ignorant.
Did you actually say that?
No, it wasn't me.
Actually, I believe it was John Stuart Mill.
Utilitarianism, Unitarianism. Where are we going with this?
All right, let's refocus. Motihari Brigade encourages listeners to keep asking questions, to be problematic. That's the name of the title track. And it's clearly also a central theme that emerges throughout the entire album. George Orwell, does that theme resonate with you?
Yes, indeed. Intimately so. The album paints a picture of a world in which digital algorithmic groupthink attempts to shape reality itself. I see being problematic, as they say, as a means of resistance to such controlled language and curated narratives that construct an artificial and false reality.
Socrates?
Oh, I'm problematic, baby. I was the original problematic. I asked questions. I sought truth. And that was a big problem. That song could be my theme song. I was very problematic.
Jesus Christ?
Well, obviously I was problematic in my time. And hopefully something good came of it. I died for the sins of the world.
I died for my own sins.
Well, that was before my time, Socrates. So I guess that's true.
Well, I don't believe in the afterlife.
Then where do you think we are now, Orwell?
I don't know exactly. Someone's dream, perhaps in someone's memory.
Speak for yourself, Orwell. I'm a spiritual being.
I never knew if there was an afterlife, or if death was like a kind of dreamless sleep. In any case, I focused my attention on how to live life, seeking truth as the highest moral virtue.
Well, it may be a dreamless sleep for you, Orwell, but then I'd say you are at least in someone's dream.
Yes, and probably being used in an advertisement to promote this album.
Well then, I take back everything I said about Motihari Brigade, not misappropriating the term Orwellian for an agenda.
At least you are being remembered.
Indeed, none of you are in any danger of being forgotten. You've all made your mark. And as our time is running out, I'm going to ask you each for closing remarks. Jesus, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to address?
Yes. Something problematic. Maybe it's already been said enough, but let me go ahead and say it again. This album talks a lot about war, the cycles of violence. I had a lot to say about that in my teachings. Really, I think I've said enough on that. If people still don't get it by now, then they probably won't. The only thing I want to add is that it's good to hear someone else saying it. I appreciate that this new album, Problematic, talks about war.
Orwell?
Yes. War depends very much on narrative control. Narrative control is what they call it these days. In my day, we just called it propaganda. And I know what songs Jesus is referring to: the rock opera war, the hubris march, the connected songs about war, heedless of the storm, and 10 years' time. They go through the entire process, the cycle of how war propaganda is created, and then sold to the public by the media and intellectuals in the service of the state. But ultimately it is we who choose to believe the lies, we who allow ourselves to be deceived. The most important lie is the one that we choose to believe, the lie that we tell ourselves, what we want to believe. That's where our friend here can be of assistance with his method of Socratic questioning. The only hope for the future is the human capacity for individual critical thinking. As I've said before on previous occasions, the only place where you are truly free is the few inches of space between your ears.
Thank you, George. Jesus?
That's basically what I've been saying about being a moral agent with free will. And this stuff about media criticism, I just want to say, look, I'm omniscient, and I didn't get that way by reading The Economist or watching Fox News or MSNBC. That's all I'm going to say about that. You have to dig a little deeper. I know I'm supposed to be all about the power of faith, but take it from me. When it comes to the media, you also need a little skepticism. You shouldn't put your faith in them.
Well, there you have it, straight from Jesus himself. Socrates, any closing remarks?
I want to say, in addition to the philosophical ideas that we have been discussing, this album has a kind of energia, energy. The electric guitar, it has energy.
Jesus?
Yes, and also the Creedence Clearwater Revival cover of Fortunate Son. It was nice to see that one resurrected.
George?
Rock and roll thought crime indeed. I don't mind them borrowing that phrase. The album does have an energy that breathes life into it.
And with that final thought, unfortunately, our time has come to a close. It's been a truly remarkable conversation. Reflections on the new album by Motihari Brigade. Problematic, out on June 25th, just in time for George Orwell's birthday. A challenge for listeners to think, to question, and to resist. Or, as the band puts it, to be problematic. You can listen to Problematic at mbrigade.com. My thanks to our amazing guests for their philosophical insights: George Orwell, Socrates, and Jesus Christ. And to our listening audience. I'm your host, Alex Dugan, reminding you to keep asking questions. Thank you for listening to It's the Art, Stupid, a public radio-themed podcast production of Creative Destruction Records and Spam Risk Promotions.